Life Audio.
Welcome to But Jesus Drank Wine.
And other stories that kept us stuck. I'm Mead.
And I'm Christy.
In this podcast, we'll explore the stories that kept us, stuck, wanting to drink and not wanting to drink, all at the same time.
Join us as we show you that freedom from alcohol does not have to mean a life sentence of misery and missing out,
but actually means living an authentic life full of peace, joy, and purpose. Welcome back to the But Jesus Drank Wine podcast. Today, we're joined by one of the world's leading experts on teen drinking and prevention, Dr. Rob Turrisi. Dr. Turrisi is a professor at Penn State and a researcher whose 35 plus years of work have shaped national programs through MAD, Mothers Against Drunk Driving, and schools across the U.S. In this important and hope-filled conversation, we go beyond the stats to explore what really works when it comes to parenting teens, especially when it comes to trust, boundaries, and those tough conversations around alcohol and beyond. If you're a parent, mentor, teacher, or anyone who cares about the next generation, today's episode is a must listen. Here is our conversation with Dr. Turrisi now. Welcome. Happy Monday, everyone. We are so excited today to introduce you to our new friend. Dr. Rob Turrisi has joined us here in the studio, and we're so excited to have a chat around one of the things that I think is near and dear to so many of our hearts, whether you're a mom or a mentor to youth, is how do we navigate, how do we steer them away from alcohol abuse and alcohol use in general? And so, Dr. Rob Turrisi, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
I'm so glad. We had a nice little chat a few months ago when we were talking about doing this interview. And one of the things that I loved about chatting with you, Dr. Turrisi, was you're so knowledgeable. You're such an expert clearly in this area. And I would love for you to share with our listeners a little bit more about what you do. But what I love more than how wise you are and how much of an expert you are is just your passion for the work you do. And so will you just share with our listeners, how did you get to this place of doing the work that you do, and obviously with this great passion for it?
Well, thank you. So, there's a lot of stories. There's a lot of different threads of how I'm sitting here today. So, for me, I have to pick one. And so I'll pick two because I get to do whatever I want.
I love it.
So the earlier position of how I ended up being where I am now is I always kind of felt like I want to do something meaningful. And I wanted to do something that would have an impact on a lot of people, but not require a lot from them, but also have a big impact. So my running joke is that I want to reach millions of people, ask them to do very little, but have a super large impact. And that seems like an easy thing to do, right? Everybody does that.
Piece of cake.
So that's kind of, I think I've always wanted to do that type of thing. I think even as a kid, if I look back, I always had 5 jobs. And I thought of this when I turned 60, like, why do I still have 5 jobs? Can't I just be normal? Like other people have 1 job to do or something like that?
You're in the right crowd. We've got about 15 jobs with this ministry.
I thought about the idea of how many different jobs. I cut lawns, I did paper, I did newspaper, I helped elderly people. I just always had a lot of different jobs. And by the way, I didn't make hardly any money from any of these jobs. And so the truth of the matter is I worked for virtually nothing most of the time. And I didn't have much either. So it's kind of funny, my family was pretty modest. And so you would think I would try to actually make some money to help them. But anyway, so that being the case, I think that mentality took me through college. And then it took me into grad school. And I didn't just want to get my PhD. I wanted to do something meaningful. I was always fortunate to be around other people that were very giving. And so I'm here in large part because my advisor, helped me become a professional. And then and it's lifelong. Like I could call him up now at any time and he'll chat with me and I'll get a chance to share. So I think I've been very fortunate to have the opportunities that I've had, but also I've had people around me that have modeled a lot of generosity. in everything they do. And I remember, I won't name names, but he never would, if somebody wasn't doing their job, he'd be more likely to promote them than fire them, just to give them more of an opportunity. And I think that was a classic thing that I learned. I don't do that, but I mean, he did. And I was very generous of him to think that way. And I asked him about it one day. He's like, well, everybody struggles. This person is struggling. And then I had a colleague of mine that one day I said I had a lot of grading to do, and I was whining about that for when I teach classes. And he said, well, just give them all A's. I said, well, I can't give them all A's. Some people work harder than others. You have to reward them. He said, but you're not taking into consideration all the struggles that some of those other people are taking. And that perspective on not everybody's coming at this at the same place when they show up stuck with me. I didn't give them all A's, but I gave them the opportunity to get all A's, and I changed in terms of being more compassionate to them and understanding. And now, even when I have a grad student that's a teaching assistant, they say to me, like I say, I have a want and a need, and that's all I have. And they're like, okay. I said, I need you to, when a student says I'm having difficulty, that you say, you okay, as opposed to thinking they're trying to get over on you or there's some challenge. If they say they're sick, then ask them what we can do to help them. That like always think about it from their perspective. And then I said, okay, what's your want? I said, to fill my need. So I think that this has always been kind of a part of who I am. So I think it's natural. Now, how did I get to work with families? That's kind of a funny story. I was working with adults who had alcohol problems, and most of them had multiple drunk driving offenses. And they're usually in their 30s or 40s by the time they start getting some degree of treatment. And even then, it's going to be a challenge for that to work because relapse is so prevalent. And I remember an early job I had, and I was working with teenagers, but at this point in time, I was working with only adults, only an alcohol problem. And I thought to myself, maybe we should try and prevent this from happening. So get younger. Yeah. And so I thought about working with adolescents at that point, and I had a choice to reach adolescents, and it was primarily through community or schools, because that's where they are all the time, or their parents. And I thought, there's a lot of people that are trying to do work in schools, and it's just so political, such a challenge. I'm going to work directly with the families. So I thought, I'm going to work with parents and help them parent teenagers in a way that's successful, right? And everybody I knew came to me and said, you have a successful career working, doing the work you're doing. Why would you want to do this?
Why would you want to?
And I was a little naive because I thought, well, this is the chance to reach them while they're young before they're coming to me 20 years later.
Oh, so good.
I didn't think about the difficulties of how hard it is to try and get adolescents to do things. And I didn't think about the difficulties between parents and adolescents. But I was awoken to that quickly, rapidly. And I still believe the idea of it doesn't have to be difficult. Adolescence is always thought of as a time where it's really, 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 really hard. And I'm not saying it's easy, but it doesn't have to be difficult. And I think if parents adopted a slightly different view on adolescence, maybe that can change things, like really focus on positive elements of the relationship. And so that's kind of what I did. And I guess I persevere. Like, even though there's troubles and there's barriers and things come up, my focus has always been on trying to do it. So that's where I came from. And that's why I started working with teenagers and their parents, because parents, my thought was, and also the idea of what's the smallest thing I can do that would help this relationship and then help the child not have to show up in my office 20 years downstream, right? Yeah. So it's the smallest things I could do. And so I really work with parents that were doing a really, really good job of this, and parents that were struggling, and just kind of looked at the differences between what they did and thought about, like, can I reach the masses with some of these approaches? And so in my earlier clinical trials, I'd always add like a trick question at the end. And the one question was, tell me one thing as a parent that you do that really makes a difference. And I thought from working with thousands of parents, I'd get like 100 things, and I'd write a book called 100 Things That Parents Do That Are Successful. In reality, we didn't get 100 things. And so I switched it to the 10 things that parents can do to be successful. And the reality is it's not even 10 things, like 1 or 2 or 3 things that really matter. And I realized, well, it's not going to really work to make a good book, but we can help a lot of people. So that's kind of how I ended up where I am at.
Can you tell us what those few things are?
Yeah, but I'd like to go into pretty good depth if that's possible on those several things that are doing.
Please.
The first thing, and I'm only starting off with this because you talked about wanting me to do a Tiny Tina later, and I was thinking, what is my Tiny Tina? So anyway, this is when I talk and I say this is what I think, then I'm offering my opinion. And when I say the data show, then I'm offering what the science shows. So here's what I'm going to show. The data show, and it's almost unequivocal. This is all there is to it. And these are studies that have been done in the US, Australia, and Europe. Countless ones, actually. And Eric, my team has done a number of these studies. We look at what is the one thing that parents could do to increase the chance of their kids not having harm come from their lives. It's don't let them drink.
Wow.
That's it. Like, in other words, the younger, and I'll share that. So if you discourage your children from having access to alcohol, they will be less likely to develop alcohol use disorders. Some of the things I'm about to say sound so obvious too. So I realize the sun comes up in the east, sets in the west. I'm saying that right now, but there's science that really backs this up. Strong, good science. That the earlier they initiate, the more frequent they drink when they're older, and the larger quantities. So when a teen's going to experiment, if they start earlier, that experimentation is going to be much more frequent, much more often. I mean, much more frequent, some more often, as well as higher quantities, as if they discouraged to be later on. So if somebody starts drinking at 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, they are more likely to have more harm come from alcohol than if they start at 19, 20, 21, or 20, 21. They're less likely to be in treatment for any kind of alcohol problems. I mean, they're substantially less likely. And it doesn't matter where they grow up. They can grow up in Europe, where alcohol is more prevalent for young people than in the United States, despite what we all think here in the US. It can be Australia, where, again, people always think about Australia and the bars and, going out and lifting a pint and, doing something. It doesn't really matter. That holds true everywhere. Whereas that if you could discourage your kids from drinking longer, they're going to be better off. That is really what it comes down to. And here's the interesting thing. When you think about a parent side of this, parents kind of fall, and I don't want to dichotomize parents. They're much more complex than that. But they're going to fall into one of two categories on this. They're going to fall into the no. It's illegal. You shouldn't be drinking until you're older. 21 is the age. So no, then not in my house. And then the other parents are like, they're going to drink anyway, so I'd rather supervise that and help them. So in other words, being caring, compassionate, and wanting to help them by introducing it to them at a younger age so that they are aware of the effects and they know things. And so there's a lot of parents that are out there that are really trying to help their kids by allowing them to drink in supervised ways. And the data show that it's not effective. In fact, it's not only not effective, the opposite is true. Even when they're drinking in a controlled environment and they're learning and so on, they still will drink heavier and more frequently when they're not with their parents and their peers. And they will have more harm come to them. So we did this really landmark study where we studied high school students that transition to college. And we did it at multiple universities throughout the country so that there wouldn't be just one school kind of thing. And so we did this, and we did 4 years. So we followed the parents and the students throughout from before they started college until they went to college. Now, there might be some people out there listening saying, well, what about the kids that don't go to college? This holds true for them as well. But this particular study is interesting because what we found was that the young people young adults, young emerging adults came from the families who said, no, 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 no. They drank less in their first year of college. They drank less in their fourth year of college. They experienced less harm in their first year of college, and they experienced less harm in their fourth year of college. For the parents that wanted to be helpful, their kids drank more in their first year of college. They got drunk more. They had higher peak BAC drinking occasions where they drank more drinks. They experienced more problems. So we know a lot about maturing out, right? So people are going to get, they're going to experiment, and then as they get older, they're going to take on more adult responsibilities and roles and mature out. Well, they didn't. In their senior year, they drank twice as much as they did in their first year. They experienced twice as many problems. And we didn't test for this, but we are now. They probably left college with an alcohol use disorder.
Yeah.
Okay. Because that's what we're seeing now. We're seeing 1 in 5 seniors that drink alcohol when they're in college are showing meeting criteria for the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual for Clinical Alcohol Use Disorder.
Yeah.
And when you think about that, 1 in 5 teens, they're 21, they're not teens anymore, 22, that are drinking or leaving already having enough symptoms to make criteria for an alcohol use disorder. When you add that up across the country, in 2 years, that's going to be the size of the cities of San Francisco, Denver, Atlanta, Boston. So every 2 years, there's another wave of people that are, and they're not going to get treated until they're in their 20s and 30s. So when I say the one thing that makes a difference is that, it's so simple, right? In some ways, like what I said, it's something simple that you don't have to do a lot. And all you have to do is discourage, not endorse it, not say, in my house, we'll protect them, we'll watch them, we'll have all the friends come over, they can't drive, they'll sleep over, all that. Just discourage it. And it's a temporary thing. So I know that your approach is a sober life, right? And sober life is going to really reduce your chance of having that problem. So that's consistent with that approach. But even the idea of having a drink socially every once in a while, if you wait, from 17 to 20, 21, you're only waiting a few years. You have your whole life in front of you to make your adult decisions about what you want to do with your life. Yeah. Your odds of having any problems with alcohol are infinitesimally lower, no matter even the genetic side of that. Yeah. So one thing, if parents are out there listening, discourage it. I'll even help you with a little anecdote, if that's okay. Is that all right?
Yes, of course.
Right. So I try not to talk too much about my own kids because they should be able to live their own lives and not be the topic of my podcasts and things. And I try to do this, but it reminds me of one of the stories from one of my children. And we were going to a game in another city, meet some friends and go to a game. And he said, do you think we'll have a beer together before I'm 21? And I thought, I said, well, if I didn't know what I know, I would probably say yes. In fact, I can envision a scenario where it's Thanksgiving and we're about to sit down and watch a game and you're like 19 or 18 and you go to the fridge and say, is it okay if I have a beer? And I would say, yeah, sure. It's just a beer. What's the big deal, right? Mm-hmm. And if I didn't know what I knew, that's probably what I would do, right? Yeah. But I do know what I know. And I think I'd be a bad dad knowing what I know if I said, yeah, go ahead. But open-minded. And, we do science, but there are questions we don't know the answers to. So That's why we do it. So I'll tell you what. Why don't you give yourself a couple of weeks and think about how that will make us closer, how that will improve our relationship.
Ooh, so good.
Yeah, you're speaking our language right here.
And if you can come up with a convincing argument, I'll buy the first round.
Dr. Rob, you're amazing.
And so So 2 weeks goes by, 3 weeks goes by. I don't hear anything. And I turned and I said, remember the talk we were having? And he said, yeah, I remember it. I said, I kind of figured at 2 weeks you would try and give me a couple of reasons why that would make our relationship be stronger if that happened. He said, yeah, I couldn't think of anything. I think it's fine the way it is. And I went, sounds good. Now, did that mean that he never drank?
Right.
No.
Yeah.
But his protective factor was that I didn't encourage it. And that's all it took. And then I had another colleague of mine, a friend of mine. I was visiting him. I was given an invited keynote at his university. And we had dinner the night before, and he had 3 daughters. And his youngest daughter was in high school at the time. And she said, like, my sisters drank all throughout high school. And I'm going to be honest with you, not like they were. I'm going to drink. I'm going to go to parties, but I'm never going to drive. I'm never going to get in a car with somebody who's driven. But I am going to have beers on occasion at parties in high school. And I'm being honest, they just weren't. So, or would you rather I lied to you and still go? So he asked me this question at dinner, and I said, I'll answer that tomorrow, if that's okay. He said, what would you do if you were presented with that situation? And the next day, I said, yeah, I'd say, well, my wife has a saying, which her saying is, with every privilege comes some responsibility. So if you get a privilege, then you have some responsibility. I would say that I kind of adhere to that sometimes. I kind of just want the privilege sometimes. That the responsibility.
For honest, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I said, if I was presented with that situation, I told them, here's what I would say. I'd say, sure, you can drink at parties. Thanks for being honest. But with every privilege comes responsibility. So I would like you to volunteer for the community, if that's okay, if you in return for that privilege. And what I want you to do is volunteer at a local center that helps people with alcohol problems on Friday and Saturday nights. You start at 7:00 and you finish around midnight. We'll come and pick you up. And the reaction that you would get from a typical teenager is, no, I'm not doing, I'll never be able to go out. It's like, yeah, but you're allowed to drink now. You just, you have to volunteer on Fridays and Saturday nights for whole of high school.
Yeah.
And he said, I didn't think of that. And I was like, well, here's the thing. You get a privilege, but you got a responsibility. Unless you're willing to meet the responsibility, then you shouldn't take the privilege. And of course, the responsibility is every night that there's a party, you have to volunteer. And then they'd say to you, well, I don't think that's fair. And say, well, you gave me 2 alternatives that I didn't like. One was that you're going to drink and the other is going to lie to me. And I had to pick between the two. So I gave you 2 alternatives you don't like. Volunteering every Friday and Saturday night, so you can't really go to any party, but letting you drink. And maybe we can have a conversation where instead of you giving me 2 alternatives I don't like, we think of a third one that we both can live with. And I think that's the second piece, which is when you're working with teens, some things are negotiable and some things are non-negotiable. And the things that are non-negotiable are things that would bring them harm, right? And the things that are negotiable, you negotiate a lot. You give them a lot of choices on a lot of things that they get to do, but you don't ever negotiate on something that's going to harm them.
Yeah.
And so I think maybe I give you 2 tiny Tinas, right? See, I told you I was going to give you 2 stories. I was going to do my approach when somebody says, tell us the one thing, I say, well, the one thing is actually 3 things. And then
I like your style.
I like my style too. So
can I ask a question about, I'm from Los Angeles, but I live in the UK. I've been here for 18 years. So the drinking age over here is 18.
Yep.
It's just all about me now. Sorry. I have a 15-year-old and a 13-year-old. And so the drinking starts really young over here. So what would you tell me to do as a parent to it will be legal for my daughter in 2.5 years.
As it is for...
What do I do?
Well, as it is for people in the U.S. that travel abroad, they take their kids with them and then they're allowed to drink in certain places and they're not allowed to drink. So I think, I prefer not to tell people what to do. I prefer to give them alternatives and then have them pick what they do.
Okay.
And I think the data are the data, whether it's a legal thing or not a legal thing. And so the data show that, just because it's legal, and legal drinking ages are usually set for public health reasons that are related to things like driving.
Yeah.
Right. You know that somebody's not going to be able to drive until a certain age. And so you set it at an age. In the US, it's a little different because kids can drive at 16 or 17, but they can't really drink until they're 21.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of an odd thing, right? And there's the argument of they can get drafted and be enlisted in the military, but they can't really drink until they're 21. Like they could die, but they can't do and a lot of our ages are a bit arbitrary, but they're based on public health. But I think the data on early initiation don't have anything related to laws. And I think the data that shows your health doesn't have anything related to laws. And so if I was a parent and my kids were growing up in the UK where they can go into a bar and drink at 18, I would still try to discourage them from doing that because the data show that the earlier that you drink, the more likely you have lifelong health problems.
Yeah.
And so it's a health reason. I mean, it's a health reason at 13, 14, 15, and 16 as well.
Yeah.
So I do a lot of work I have done a lot of work in Europe pre-COVID, and some of the materials that we use here in the US are being used in Europe as well as other continents. So it's the same idea. It's like, it's not really what's legal, it's what's healthy for you. And if I'm your parent, my job is to try and help you make healthy choices, right? Not make the choices for you, but have you teach you to make choices. So at 18, you still have a choice. It's legal.
Mm-hmm.
But maybe you might want to choose to kind of postpone that because, typical 18-year-old's not going to be having a social small glass of wine and talking about like how to save up enough money to buy a flat, So that kind of thing. I think that's the approach that I would be taking, not about what's legal or not. Because in the US, access to alcohol is much greater, before you're 21. And in Europe, access to alcohol is much greater before you turn 18. So it's really not all that different.
Yeah.
It's just accessibility. I mean, I think in most places in Europe, you're allowed to drink in a bar if your parents present.
Yeah.
So
from 16, I think, in some places.
Exactly.
Yeah. So in 4 months, she could be it's wild.
Yeah. And so what's happening is that they're saying to you, like, control your kids,
Right.
You're allowed to drink in our bar.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a little weird for us in the US to go over to Europe and see 13-year-olds with a pitcher of beer. It's a little odd for us. And I'm not saying they're not responsible. The data are the data. Like I've had parents say to me, like, my kid's responsible, and I don't doubt that for a moment. But I also can say, but your brain's not fully developed until they're at least in their mid-20s.
Right.
And what that means is that there's different centers of your brain that have primary responsibilities for certain things. So your emotional centers of your brain they develop earlier. And then your cognitive, the frontal cortex, develops later. And so it doesn't really fully develop. And that doesn't mean there's no connectivity of maturity there. So they could be very mature under the right situation. So like when I'm sitting in a class of 100 of my students, they're raising their hand, they're saying please, they're saying thank you, they're acting extremely responsible. But on Fridays and Saturday nights, when the social rules are different, they could be potentially standing on tables and screaming woohoo and then drinking, and so those environmental
That's me in law school.
those environmental influences have a lot of say. So they're kids that have that connectivity that parents can parent to practice strengthening that connectivity between those centers can help them make better choices in those environments. And that's what I just said was parents can parent in a way that improves that connectivity. And so that's the other piece, which is that we know more about the brain development and we know more about parenting. And so teaching your kids to make smart choices and then being able to practice the skills to make those choices all go to help practice development between those emotional centers. So I work at a large university in the US. There's a drinking culture here that's extensive, and that people from all over our state come to visit because our town is the town. And so, we have 100,000 plus kids drinking on weekends, every weekend. And then that goes up to several 100,000 on certain weekends. when there's big sports in town, stuff like that. So you have lots and lots and lots of pressure. And so it's a lot harder under those circumstances to do that. Whether you're 16, 17, 18, 19, or 20, that's what exists. It's a different culture in those areas. So in Europe, where the drinking age is 18, your job is to help your kid make good choices. But by doing those things, you're also helping their brain develop and the connectivity between the emotional and the cognitive centers, so that when they're in those strong environmental influences, they can make better choices. And that's the other thing, that small things parents can do to help that.
Yeah.
So at 18, I just gave a lecture today on, the importance of the liver. That's, you want to take care of your liver, you're going to need it for the rest of your life. You don't get two. So if you do damage to the liver, and I gave them instructions on this, and I said, look, here's the deal. When alcohol is being filtered and processed through your liver, and this is where it changes from alcohol to just acids that you can get rid of. When the liver can't do its function and it's not efficiently getting rid of the alcohol, then the brain tells your body to get rid of it.
Mm-hmm.
So when you throw up, it's your body telling you your liver is not functioning properly. That's why you're throwing it up. And so if you think about what's going on there, is that your body's trying its best to get rid of the alcohol that it recognizes it's in its body, but it can't do it all. So it says, get rid of it. And then, you're being poisoned, get rid of it.
Mm-hmm.
And so, 18 years old, you want to protect that liver. You're going to need it. Just like you wouldn't go to a car and start sucking the exhaust in, because you're going to need your lungs forever too. These metaphors that we could use for like not having access, and you have your whole life to do it.
Mm-hmm.
So if you could postpone a couple of years and help your liver, maybe you'll drink less and then help your liver even more.
Yeah.
So I mean, there's
Love that.
Yeah, there's different ways to just present this information as opposed to like, you're missing out on all of this.
Yeah.
And it's kind of funny because we're all adults. And so the notion of missing out on like something when you're 18, it seems so trivial, but to them it's not. And so that you have to understand, to them, that's a big thing that they feel like they're missing out on. So, what could you do to help them not feel that way?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So they could have their liver for the rest of their lives.
Imagine stepping into a vibrant, warm community where faith, friendship, and freedom from alcohol all come together. That's exactly what you'll experience in the But Jesus Drank Wine community.
Each week, our members gather for connection calls that feel like a breath of fresh air, a time to share, grow, and support one another.
With an encouraging leadership team, a dedicated prayer request space, and connection opportunities in every time zone, you don't have to walk this journey alone.
Plus, we bring you masterclasses with expert guests, optional book clubs and Bible studies, and so much more.
And for those ready to go even deeper, we offer a small group coaching space called The Missing Piece. With weekly recorded coaching calls, it's a supportive place for women committed to breaking free from alcohol.
We're here to hold space for sober and sober-curious women who love Jesus or are eager to reconnect with him. Wherever you are on your path, you'll feel seen, supported, and strengthened here.
As one member described, quote, the BJDW community is unique because there's a connection between faith and freedom from alcohol that I haven't been able to find in any other online space or through my church.
Ready to join the sisterhood? Head over to butjesusdrankwine.com/the community or click the link in the show notes to learn more. We can't wait to meet you.
Can you say a little bit more about the peer pressure aspect of it? Because that was one of our questions is, what do we say to them, to our children who are saying, but mom, but dad, everybody's doing it?
Well, all right. So a couple of things. First thing from science that we've learned is people overestimate the number of people are actually doing it versus
Yeah.
So, well, I mean, that's just, we all do. We're all guilty of that. So they're not unique in that way.
Right.
All right. Politically, I'm not going to be political, but politically, well, there's so many people that are doing this one thing.
Right.
Probably less than, what we think.
Mm-hmm.
Or there's so many people that are not doing this something that we should all be doing or whatever. So we tend to overestimate it, of the number of people that are actually drinking. Because you think about this, like if you're at a party, right? in a certain community, you're at a party, how many people could possibly be at that party, right? Let's say 100. Let's say it's out of control. There's 100. You only have 100 people in your community that are young. So there's other people that aren't going to that party. And see people say, and then they underestimate the amount that's actually consumed too.
Yeah.
So they overestimate. Say they tend to think, oh, the average person is drinking this much. Well, you're seeing that person stand out from the crowd drinking that much. You don't see the other people not standing out from that crowd who are not drinking as much.
Right.
So you overestimate what you think is normal. So if we overestimate how many people are drinking at 18, we're overestimating what actually is going on, what's normal. And if we overestimate the amount that's being consumed, we're overestimating that. And these change what is normal, right? So peer influence could be somebody handing you a drink, say, hey, you drink this, but it also could be this implied, this is what I think is going on. And that's a level of pressure that's all there. Like social media. Oh, everybody's on social media. Well, guess what? There's a lot of people that aren't. You can't count the people that aren't because you can only count the people that are. So if I get 15 likes, that means 15 people are on. But what about the other 2,000 that are not on that didn't care whether, so there's always these overestimates of things. We're really not good at estimating. We're not. That's why we do science, because we know we're bad at it. So we collect data and we say, this is the data show.
Yeah.
And then we'll let some people say, well, your data's not right. It's like, okay, my data's not right. But how come it keeps on getting replicated in different cultures, different planets and everything like that? Is everybody wrong? Well, yeah, maybe everybody's wrong. Okay, then show me what's not. Because you seem to think that this is an accurate estimate. And we know that from the data collected over a dozen times or whatever, it's not. Then show me your data that shows that this is actually what's happening. And it's going to be very difficult to do that. So I think that peer pressure is usually an incorrect estimate of what's actually going on. Parents overestimate the number of parents that let their kids drink.
Ooh, that's good.
They do.
That's
They do.
so true.
They don't go and count everybody.
Yeah.
They don't look at their community and take a poll and then come back with a scientific study and say, of the 250 parents that are in our community, 220 let their kids drink.
Right.
Not
Right.
like that. It's actually not like that. So really what it comes down to it is we all overestimate some things.
Yeah.
Okay. And sometimes we underestimate as well. But ultimately in peer pressure type things, when you say everybody's doing it, they're probably not right. There are probably other people that have made good choices that are not doing it. And then just because everybody's doing it, we know this as parents. That's still not a good enough reason to say that you should do something that's probably not particularly healthy for yourself.
Yeah.
And the common comeback line was, well, if everybody's jumping off the bridge, would you jump off the bridge too?
Yeah.
Which I heard as a kid. That was my thing. So let's start with that. That the first thing is that usually when somebody says, when everybody's doing it, it's usually an overestimate of the actual number of people that are doing it. And there's probably plenty of people that are not doing it for different reasons. But peer pressure is real. And even adults get sucked into peer pressure.
Sure.
Yeah, exactly. Like if I have a friend coming over and said, come on, everybody's having a drink. Have a drink with us.
Oh.
It's the same thing. Now I'm 60 years old and it's like, come on, really? We're going to do that?
Yeah.
Anyways, but here's the thing about parenting, like parenting and peer pressure, because it is real, right? And we have to deal with it. So here's what we've learned to help your kids not feel the pressure, not to feel it or to do it. It has a lot to do with their friends, right? And oftentimes your kids have close friends, right? And if their close friends want to do something and they don't want to do it, if they don't go along, they lose their social, they lose their friends. And that's what they fear more than probably everything else. I'm not going to have my friends. I need my friends. Friends are important to me. So one of the things we try to encourage parents to do as early as possible, but it's never too late, is to try and get their kids involved in activities with different peer groups. Because if you have one peer group and you go against one peer group, then it's really, then you're going to be lonely, you're going to be sad. It's not going to be good.
Yeah.
Whereas if you have multiple peer groups, if one group wants to do something you really don't want to do, that means you don't lose your friends. You have another group of friends you can hang out, or another group
I
of
love
friends.
that.
So the concept of having multiple peer groups and multiple interests. So this is the idea where your kids would benefit from you trying to encourage them to have some diverse interests.
Yeah.
And my joke was the people at chess club don't go out and do shots. Actually, that may not be true. Maybe they do shots all the time. But in other words, if you have friends that are not engaged in these types of social activities and they're really strong, meaningful friendships, you can be more of an independent person than if you only have one friend group. And so if your kids are like, hey, we love to do art, and then they have art friends, and it's like, we love to do sports, and we have the same friends from our art group that also do the same sports, it's kind of a risk factor. Now you're starting to walk into the area where you only have that one friend group. And so this is a little bit difficult for, introverted versus extroverted kids, because introverted kids are probably going to have fewer friends than extroverted kids that have lots of different activities. And you're not going to try and teach your kid to not be introverted, but you can kind of understand that. Just, try and use that to try and have a couple of different social groups for them, other activities so they can do it. And that's a good strategy, because then they're not likely to say everyone's doing it, because they have a couple of friends too that are not doing it because they're in different groups in those groups. And so, so that idea of just diffusing peer influence by having different social groups. It sounds easy, it's not, but at least it's an option for parents to use, as opposed to just going along with everything.
Yeah. I'm so curious. I was thinking about when you said to discourage the drinking, if you could elaborate more about like how to do that in a way that's not doesn't create because my parents definitely discouraged it, but I was a teen that found my own, broke the rules and was rebellious. And so like when you say discourage drinking, if you could just give more, I like what you said about like with your son, you asked him, and what a great story for kind of counter conditioning to like what culture tries to sell is that alcohol is connecting and helps in relation, all the commercials you see and things like that, movies, whatever. What a great way to do that by asking him, like, how would that benefit? And so like, what does discouraging look like? Because I had parents who definitely discouraged it, but it was not.
I don't think my parents encouraged it. I drank earlier because I was an early mature, and an early mature is going to be able to hang out with older people, and older people have a different element. So there is that element. But then again, if you only have one social group and it's all the early matures, then you're going to do things that are early maturing. So again, parents could try and encourage you to hang out with some less early matures that don't necessarily get invited to all the parties and do all the stuff like that. And so discouraging could be active participation in the process, or having conversations about it. So there are probably more than 5, but there's at least 5 things that parents could do sort of on a daily basis. So one is having positive communication practices. And that's, being a good active listener, not jumping in and always trying to solve all the problems that are going on, even though you want to. But, positive, meeting your kid where they are, understanding what's going on at that level. So positive things that you can do. And then there's negative communications, and negative communications are judgmental, and they cut you kids off, and they don't listen to your ideas. Every time they try and do something, they say, well, that's ridiculous. You're not going to succeed at that. Why would you do that? That's dumb. You might think that as a parent, but if you say that, it's probably not helping you build that relationship. And then there's modeling. So you can model certain behaviors every day, model positivity. So one of the things that, you try and encourage your kids is, I know that kids are different, but happiness. And if you can encourage your kids to be happy, then the question is, well, what do I do to encourage my kids to be happy? Well, here's the happier people, not the happiest, but the happier people do some things that are different. Like, here's a good acknowledge. So there's 3 things that people can do to be happy. One is show gratitude, right? If you practice this idea of being happy or grateful for something on a daily basis as a parent, and then ask your kids, what are you grateful for today? They might say, nothing. I hate being grateful. truth is, like you could try a different strategy and just say, think about like something that happened today that you noticed that you were happy, that you noticed it was positive. So the idea is like taking a mental gratitude check at the end of the day and say, what was something that I laughed at today? Or what was something I noticed that was good that happened today? And if you get in the habit of doing that, then it comes out really easily. The other one is acknowledging. So, I do this all the time. I'm a checkout line and my goal is really to get home and I got to get dinner going and all that good stuff. But I take a moment to usually say, how's your day going? Or, wow, you're doing a really good job at that. And a lot of people respond to you like, this is my job. It's like, yeah, but a lot of people work. I just noticed that you put a lot of effort into it. You said to me when we started, this is really nice for you to share and you're kind with your time, stuff like that. That's an acknowledgement. So when people get out of themselves and acknowledge others, so not only I'm grateful for something that happened today, I was able to have a conversation with you. I acknowledge that you're doing something meaningful for people. And that again becomes habitual. And then just little random acts of kindness. And that might be holding a door open for somebody. That might be complimenting them on something that they've done or something like that. So these kind of things are contagious. And so, that's the opposite. That's modeling. Modeling these types of behaviors goes a long way for your kids to recognize. You're always like this. You do this, that kind of stuff. So there's modeling. And then there's setting up an environment at home where kids feel welcome. Your kids feel welcome. Their friends feel welcome. And I would say this to when my kids' friends would come over and their parents would come pick them up because there's always a parent picking them up. I'd say, you know what, they had a really good time today. And your son or your daughter was, no. They're welcome in our home whenever they want. They just knowledge, like saying that with the kid and the parent together is reinforcing for that kid to feel like they're welcome when they come in your house.
Yeah.
And when they come in our house, we always ask them questions like, how's your day going? What's going on? Are you hungry? Can I get you something? You've been here enough times that you could just go over to the closet and grab something if you're hungry. You don't have to ask. That kind of the welcoming thing. And then you could include your kids' own decisions. So you say things like, hey, we're going to be going out. Would you like to bring a friend with us? Would you like that? Or here we're going out. We have these choices. Which one would you want? So these things, if you do them every day, all the time, and you try your best to do those things, you build up a little bit of collateral.
Yeah.
So that when you have a difficult thing, you can share with them. Say, look, I'm a reasonable person. I'm the person that's nice. I'm the person that tries not to say bad things. I'm the person that shows you. I'm the person, the same person. This is the same person that you say you hate what I'm doing right now.
That's so good.
Try to be that positive influence. So that now when you want to have a conversation, now when you want to have like this, you could say, I'm still that same person. You might not agree with everything that I do, but my goal has always been to be the best parent I can. And that helps a lot. So these are this is the idea of small things that we can do.
Yeah.
And have a big impact, right?
So many tiny Tinas. Many tiny Tinas in
there's a triple or I'm trying to think of a T word that would come up that you could say a basket of tiny Tinas.
You don't like one.
That's the idea. We're trying to have a big impact on a lot of people, but not asking too much of them. Because the reality, and I knew this when I was a psychologist early on in my life, people don't have a lot of room for a psychologist in their lives every day.
Yeah.
And so the idea is that if I'm going to get 5 minutes, I'm going to try and make that 5 minutes as best I can.
And I just love what you say and what you're bringing to this conversation from this angle, because it's no different than when we're coaching women who are stuck in the drinking cycle. They want to change their relationship to alcohol. They want to be free from it. And they're so focused on not doing the thing. And we're like, hey, by the way, let's talk about, yes, this is what we're discouraging, not the same way a parent to a child would, but yes, we don't want to do that. But what are we going to encourage them to do? Things like have gratitude practices.
Let's talk about the women and things they do and things they like about themselves and things they don't with alcohol in their lives. Let's just be fair. We've all drank, so we know that has an effect on us, right? And are we, I'm not, I'm not complete anti-alcohol but I am anti-abuse of alcohol.
Mm.
And there's a fine line between that.
Mm-hmm.
So,
That's good.
but when you have alcohol in your body, you're more likely to not be your best version of yourself.
Yeah. Yes.
Let's be fair about that.
Ask me how I know.
Yes.
Well, yeah, I mean, you don't have, right? You don't have to hit rock bottom to know that.
That's right.
So, but you're not going to be like the person that's like, let's include people, let's listen to people. Like, our capacity to process sensory information is going to be different when we have a drug in ourselves. So we're not going to be the best listeners. We're not going to, in fact, there's data that shows alcohol myopia, which is we tend to focus on a cue and ignore other cues as well. That's the alcohol myopia effect. So like me, I might be talking to you and I notice your eyes, and my focus is on your eyes, and I'm not really thinking about the other signals you're sending to me, which is, well, you're being creepy, blah, 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 blah. Like, we're not going to do that. But my point being is that you're when you have alcohol,
narrow focus.
Yeah, your focus is going to be different than if you don't. So if you're parenting while under the influence of a substance, you're going to be that. Then you're going to get tired. And when you get tired, you're not the best version of yourself either, because you're probably going to be shorter with people. You're going to be more likely to get aggravated and whatever that might happen. So there's a time and a place for it, but you're not going to have the energy. And let's be realistic about that. The data show that you sleep better when you don't drink the night before or the day before. You sleep better, you're going to have more energy. You're going to have more energy, you're going to be able to do different things. So, I mean, it becomes cyclical. And again, a small amount, if that's your thing, you could probably do fine with that. But if you pass a small amount, then there are going to be negative effects, and you're not going to be the best version of yourself. And ultimately, what it comes down to, there's science that really backs this up.
Yeah.
What part of it is healthy in your life and what part of it wouldn't be healthy in your life. And I joked earlier, and I said, you picked two of the tough topics, right? In life in general. One is alcohol, because it's just pervasive in our lives and our cultures. Doesn't matter where you are. It could be in Europe, right? Or you could be here, or you could be somewhere else. Still is, wherever you are. And then parenting, which is a challenge, right? I mean, it's the toughest job I've ever done, and I'm still doing it. And even though my kids are adults, I care about them. I care about their relationships. I care about their livelihood, their health, and so on. So it's a never-ending thing. So you said your children were 13 and 15, Christy. I hear by the time they get to be about 40, it gets better. So, forward to.
Well, fine. It's fine. Hang in there, friend.
Yeah, but it's a different relationship, and it evolves over time. And that's those things that you could do. You could still be positive. You can still reduce the negative. You can still model. So I remember I got interviewed on NPR. And for people that are, nerdy scientists like me, NPR is the bomb, right? I got to be on NPR. I sent my mom a CD, so in the 40s, I sent her the CD of the NPR thing.
So cute.
And she put it on the refrigerator. And, but anyway, I said, did you get a chance to listen to it? And she said, I did. And she said, and she thought, she paused for a second, and she said, but you don't listen to me. You say that you don't listen to me. I said, no, I do listen to you. I actually solicit information from you because that's our relationship now. But I'm an adult and I have a family, and I make different choices sometimes than you would say, but I do listen. You're teaching me right now how to be a parent of my adult children.
Yeah.
And that was like a message. And so you took on these two really challenging things, which is the alcohol issue and then the parenting issue, and the combination of the two. So I guess for the moms out there and the women that want to have a different life is about alternatives. For me, I find that Sprite's a good alternative. I find that there's a cranberry spritzer that I find to be a tremendous alternative. And I like having a drink in my hand, so I go to one of those. iced tea is a decent one during the day, but I got to be careful about caffeine, and so I might be slightly addicted to Sprite and cranberry spritzes and iced tea, but I sleep better at night and I could be a better version of myself. The other purpose is what do we want to get from alcohol? Like what is it doing for us that draws us in? And, for some it could be a stress reduction thing. Like in other words, you have a drink and you feel less stress. That doesn't mean you have less stress. You feel less stress. So that stress is still going to be there the next day. And it's also
It's going to be amplified.
Sometimes, but ultimately it's healthier for us to be able to deal with the stress in other ways.
Yeah.
And again, one of the 5 things of parenting is modeling. So if we're using alcohol as a stress reducer and we're modeling that, that's an effect, right?
Yes.
The other is social lubricant, like we're uncomfortable in social situations so that we use alcohol. I try and teach our kids to ask people questions and start with what, why, and how to get to know people. So, what are you interested in? Why do you choose that? How does that work for you? I'm interested in that. So there's other ways of teaching those social skills to be able to do it without the crutch. But like I said, love cranberry juice spritzers. They're great. They taste good. There's some nutritional positive value, I think. But at the end of the day, it allows me to try and be the version of myself that allows me to socialize where I'm not socializing under the influence or to somebody else that's under the influence. And I try and teach my kids those strategies when they're growing up, how to socialize so that they're not uncomfortable in those situations, and encourage it a little bit. But then think about the 5 things I could do, which is parent positive communication, try to avoid negative, model, try and create an environment where people feel welcome and accepting, and then having my kids make choices about that. I don't remember ever having my kids say to me, "We like the version of you better when you've had something to drink."
Yeah.
Right.
No.
Although that could happen, I could easily see them saying that because they're wise. They're trying to figure out ways to do things.
Yeah, that's
We wanna
right.
do something. So if we give you a couple of drinks, maybe you'll be okay at saying yes. We'll do that, which would be really diabolical. I'm glad my kids aren't like that. I have a colleague of mine who's, I think, one of the most amazing scientists in our country, an alcohol research scientist who's never had a drink in her life. And I said to her, like after having a couple of dinners, I said, "I've noticed you don't drink. Is that a like what's going on there?"
Yeah.
And she said, "I have alcoholism in my family, and so I don't know if the first drink I have is going to set me down a path that I don't want to go. So I just chose not to."
Yeah.
And I thought, wow, what a mature position to take, because a lot of people will try and figure it out for themselves, and they might do fine and they might not. But this is a massive industry for a reason. People like drinking. In fact, people don't like to be told they shouldn't drink.
Yeah.
I work with college students, and the one thing for certain I could tell you, they are not going to change if I say you shouldn't be drinking.
Yeah.
They're going to change because they're motivated, and then if they're motivated, they're going to have different motives for why they don't want to drink. And usually they're going to be around, I want to have a good time, but I don't want to feel like crap. I want to have a good time, but I don't put myself in a risky situation. I want to have a good. So they're trading off these decisions that they want to do. And so the idea is that they can lower the amount that they drink from something to nothing or something to something, and potentially not have the problems that they would have. So again, not every single person out there will a drink or 10 cause a problem the same way as others. And I think for me, from our conversation, you made the right decision about not having alcohol, because it wasn't going to be just a small amount and that you're going to be fine. And if that's the case, then you can easily exist without alcohol as an adult or a young person. It's actually, once you get past a certain threshold, it's not that hard to do.
It's not hard at all.
But for a lot of people, recognizing their difficulty with getting past that threshold is being caring, compassionate. So I do remember a story that a colleague who had literally the best alcohol research center in the country. And he's passed, unfortunately, for melanoma. But Alan Marlatt was considered like the father of relapse prevention science.
Mm-hmm.
And I asked him, how did that come about? And he told me his story. And his story was that he had a client of his that he was seeing who said, Dr. Marlatt, you've helped me understand the dynamics between my family and I and things that happened in my childhood and so on. I appreciate that. It's been very helpful for me. However, can you give me something that will keep me from when I get off the bus walking into the bar?
Mm-hmm.
It's the bus stop is right across the bar that I go into. And Alan went back, he was a young clinical psychologist, went back to his advisor and said, can I help him? Do you have anything? And the advisor said, well, you haven't fully uncovered all the issues of his childhood yet. So you need to go back and work on that. And they did that for a little while and he kept on saying, Dr. Marlatt, thank you. But I still want to walk into that bar and I still have cravings every time I get off the bus. So finally one day Alan took the bus with him. And then they decided what they do is that he said, instead of getting off at this stop, let's just get off at the next stop.
Yeah.
And they got to the next stop and they stood there for a while and he said, how do you feel? And I know that sounds like this is going to be the perfect solution, Disney ending. But what he was doing is he was giving him successive skills to be able to deal with the cravings and the cues and the things to get out.
Mm-hmm.
Now, would that happen the next time he's at a social event with his business colleagues and things like that? Like, in other words, you can't bring your psychologist to every function. At some point, you have to develop the skills. But at the end of the day, that's why relapse is challenging.
Yeah.
Because you're going to be a person that's going to be traveling for work and you're staying in a hotel. And before you get to the elevators to your room, you're walking past the bar and everybody in the bar is laughing and joking and the game's on TV, like all these cues that.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. Or somebody invites you over for dinner and they're already pouring wine in everybody's glasses and you have to say, no, I'm good. I just want cranberry spritzer. I brought my own,
Mm-hmm.
So
It
whatever
happens,
it is. Yeah, exactly. Those little things. And then some people like talking about it. Other people don't. So some people, they say, oh, I noticed you're not drinking anymore, and you could say things like, well, yeah, because I realized I was ruining my life.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And again, everybody doesn't have that element of it.
Yeah.
One of the things that you said on another podcast that really stuck with me was the statistic of kids in college that if they're drinking, how that relates to the actual harm that comes to them at their end. Can you just say like a little bit about that? Because I remember hearing you say that and I was like, oh my gosh, wow, I did not know that. So powerful.
All right. So if you're a drinker in college and you're typical, you're average, okay, you're going to experience 100 consequences across the 4 years. And it's not like you're going to experience more in your first than your last. It's on an average about 25 per year. If you come from a home where your parents did not discourage you, that number goes up to close to 200. So it's about 50 different things. So those consequences. So some people will say, well, Rob, when you say that, like, are you talking about hangovers, like the next day feeling tired?
Yeah.
And stuff? I say, yeah, that's included, but so is blacking out.
Yeah.
And if you black out even partially, like where you don't remember parts of an evening.
Brownout.
Yeah. Well, we call it partial blackout, but anyway.
I called it a brownout.
We want to call it what they are. We want to say partial blackout. You're blacking out. You really are. But anyway, so if you experience more problems on those nights and more severe ones.
Mm-hmm.
So when we talk about these, we're not talking about just hangovers or headache the next day. We're talking about getting into fights. We're talking about maybe having legal activities. We're talking about maybe needing some medical attention. We're talking about the likelihood that you either are a victim of sexual unwanted sex or you're an assailant of unwanted sex.
Mm-hmm.
There's serious consequences. And for the unfortunate 75 a weekend, you're not around on Monday to talk about it ever again.
Mm-hmm.
And every weekend, 75 college students that were excited to get into college, to go to college, to do major in whatever they want to major, are not shown up for Monday's classes because of an alcohol-related death. 75 every weekend. So we're talking, I guess you're going to run this on a Monday. We're going to be coming off of a weekend where we lost 75 more kids.
In the US.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Alcohol poisonings, falling out of a building, getting hit by, walking into the street, getting hit by a car. That's running away from party, falling asleep or passing out, choking on your vomit. Deaths. Yeah. Every weekend. Those statistics were compiled and given to me by Ralph Hinkson, the Associate Director of the National Institute of Alcohol Abuse and Alcoholism. And that's just crazy, right? You don't want to be the parent that gets that phone call. No. And you don't want to be the brother or sister of the person that you no longer have, and so on. So I asked my students today in class, I'll end on a positive note. I asked my students in class, why are we talking about this today?
Good.
You know, like, why are we spending time in this and not, say, cardiovascular health or whatever that might be today? And one of the students said, to try and prevent harm going in the future. I said, yeah, and I'll add one too, the harm right now. So that's why we talk about this. That's why we have these conversations, because this is something that's completely preventable, like cancer.
Yeah.
And my other line of work I do is in cancer. I can't solve cancer tomorrow, but I can solve this one. If everybody decides to limit the amount that they have, then we'll have fewer incidents, substantially fewer incidents. We won't have cities the size of San Francisco, Atlanta, and Boston every 2 years for new alcohol use disorders. We won't have any more getting in a car with a drinking driver or getting hit by a train. We won't have any of that stuff. So that's something that's completely preventable.
When you say that, and then I look at the questions that you answered all of them when you were speaking, but of like, but what do I say to my daughter who wants to have a glass at homecoming? You know, it's just like, it just puts it into just such great perspective. And so thank
We
you.
never have to have arguments about it. We just like, this is what we know.
Yeah.
So, you know, and they're like, well, one drink at homecoming's not going to kill me. Well, you know what? There's a lot of people that had one night that they went off the rails. And I just don't want you to have that night.
Yeah.
That's all.
Thank you so much for the work that you do and for sharing your work with us. And I'm so grateful. Thank you, Dr. Turrisi. I think this is going to be so helpful for our listeners. And
let me know how it goes. I really, really hope that it helps a lot of people. That's great. Whenever we can pass it on, that's fantastic. And thank you for reaching out to me, both of you. It's been fun to hang out with you. And if there's anything I could do in the future, let me know.
Oh, you're amazing. Thank you, Dr. Rob. We appreciate you
so much. Yeah.
Actually, the people you should be thanking are all the people that work with me on these projects, because they do all the hard work.
Well, if you ever need to pull some moms, we'll help you. Let us know how we can help you too.
Yeah.
Well, like, you know,
help each other.
Moms are like the most important people in the world. So strength to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Enjoy.
We'll talk soon.
All right.
Bye.
Before we go, if you're craving real connection and want to talk more about what we've shared today, come join us in the BJDW community. It's where these conversations continue, and we'd love to welcome you in.
You can find all of our podcast episodes at butjesusdrankwine.com. And don't forget to follow us on Instagram at butjesusdrankwine.
Take a screenshot of this episode and share it with a friend or two.
Be sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. And if you love what we're doing, we'd be so grateful if you left a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify.
Your reviews help more women who feel stuck and alone in the overdrinking cycle find the hope and encouragement they've been praying for.
Finally, we'd love to shout out the incredible team at Life Audio for their partnership with us at the But Jesus Drank Wine podcast. We invite you, dear listener, to visit lifeaudio.com, where you will find dozens of other faith-centered podcasts in the Life Audio network. Shows about prayer, Bible study, Christian parenting, and more.
Thanks, friend. We appreciate you so much, and we'll see you next week.